What if I told you that the only thing standing between you and the life you want is not your past, not your circumstances, not your lack of resources, but something much closer, something you face every single day? Right now, there is a silent force working against you. You don't see it, but you feel it. It shows up when you want to start but suddenly hesitate, when you have an idea but talk yourself out of it, when you know what to do but you just don't do it. That force is resistance. And here's the truth, most people will never admit it has stopped more dreams than failure ever could. Think about it. How many times have you said, "I'll start tomorrow"? How many opportunities have you delayed because you didn't feel ready? How many times have you chosen comfort over growth, even when you knew better? This isn't about blaming yourself, it's about waking up, because the difference between those who win in life and those who stay stuck isn't talent, luck, or background. It's this: winners have learned how to face resistance and move anyway. In this video, you're going to discover the real battle that decides your future, and more importantly, how to win it. Not by waiting for motivation, not by hoping things get easier, but by building the mindset and action that break resistance completely. So if you're tired of overthinking, tired of starting and stopping, tired of knowing you're capable of more but not living it, then stay with me, because by the end of this video, you won't just understand resistance. You'll know exactly how to defeat it. The idea that resistance is internal rather than external challenge is one of the most common illusions people live under. The belief that circumstances, other people, or lack of opportunity are the primary reasons for stagnation. In reality, what holds most individuals back is not the outside world, but the invisible patterns within their own thinking. Resistance operates quietly through hesitation, self-doubt, overthinking, and the constant search for the right moment. A person may have access to resources, knowledge, and even support, yet still fail to move forward because their mind is filled with conflicting thoughts. One part pushes toward growth while another part pulls back toward safety. This inner conflict creates a mental barrier far stronger than any external obstacle. Resistance often disguises itself as logic, convincing you that waiting is smarter, that preparation must be perfect, or that the risk is too high. It feels rational, which is why it is so powerful. However, beneath that surface lies fear. The fear of failure, judgment, rejection, or even the fear of stepping into a new identity that demands more responsibility. When people say they are not ready, they are often responding to this internal resistance rather than an actual lack of readiness. The mind seeks comfort because it is designed to protect you, not necessarily to help you grow. As a result, it resists change, even when that change leads to improvement. This is why two people can face the same external situation and produce completely different outcomes. One moves forward despite discomfort, while the other remains stuck, held back by their internal dialogue. The environment may present challenges, but it does not decide your response. Your mindset does. Resistance turns small doubts into convincing arguments, making inaction feel justified and safe. Over time, this pattern becomes habitual and the person begins to believe that life is happening to them, rather than being shaped by them. Recognizing that resistance is internal shifts the focus from blaming circumstances to taking ownership of one's thoughts and actions. It reveals that progress is less about changing the outside world and more about mastering the inner one. When you understand this, you begin to see that hesitation is not a signal to stop, but a sign that you are approaching growth, and that the true battle is not against obstacles, but against the part of your mind that tries to keep you exactly where you are. The idea that fear is resistance in disguise reveals how subtly the mind protects itself by masking hesitation as something rational and necessary. Fear rarely appears as a loud, obvious force. Instead, it blends into thoughts that seem practical, cautious, and even wise. It tells you to wait until you are more prepared, to avoid situations where you might fail, or to stay within familiar limits where the outcome feels predictable. This creates the illusion that you are making smart decisions, when in reality you are being guided by an internal resistance that is rooted in fear. At its core, fear is not always about real danger, but about perceived threats to your identity, your comfort, and your sense of control. The fear of failure can stop you from starting, while the fear of judgment can keep you from expressing your true ideas. Even the fear of success can create resistance, because success often brings change, responsibility, and higher expectations that challenge who you believe you are. Resistance uses these fears as tools, turning them into convincing narratives that justify inaction. It might say that the timing is not right, that the risks are too high, or that you need more certainty before you proceed. These thoughts feel safe, but they quietly keep you stuck in the same place. The more you listen to them, the stronger they become, shaping your behavior and reinforcing a pattern of avoidance. Fear thrives in uncertainty, and since growth always involves stepping into the unknown, resistance naturally intensifies whenever you are close to progress. This is why moments of opportunity are often accompanied by increased doubt and hesitation. The mind is attempting to pull you back to what is familiar, even if that familiarity limits your potential. Understanding that fear is simply resistance in disguise changes how you respond to it. Instead of treating fear as a stop sign, you begin to see it as an indicator that you are moving beyond your current limits. The presence of fear does not mean you are unprepared or incapable. It means you are stepping into something that requires expansion. By recognizing this pattern, you can separate real risks from imagined ones and prevent fear from dictating your decisions. This awareness allows you to move forward even when discomfort is present, weakening the influence of resistance over time and gradually building the confidence to act despite uncertainty. The idea that action destroys resistance highlights a fundamental principle of human behavior. Resistance thrives in stillness and weakens through movement. When a person delays, overthinks, or waits for the perfect moment, resistance gains strength by filling the mind with doubt, excuses, and imagined outcomes. Inaction gives space for fear to grow, allowing small concerns to expand into overwhelming barriers that feel difficult to overcome. The longer this state continues, the more convincing resistance becomes, shaping a mindset that associates effort with discomfort and risk with failure. However, the moment action is taken, even in a small way, this entire dynamic begins to shift. Action interrupts the cycle of overthinking by replacing speculation with experience. Instead of imagining what could go wrong, the individual begins to see what is actually happening, and this clarity reduces the power of fear. Resistance depends on uncertainty, but action creates feedback, and feedback builds understanding. As soon as a person starts moving, they realize that many of their fears were exaggerated or unfounded, and this realization weakens the hold resistance has on their decisions. Action also builds momentum, which is one of the most powerful forces in personal progress. A single step forward may feel insignificant, but it changes the direction of the mind, making the next step easier and more natural. This gradual build-up reduces the emotional weight attached to tasks that once felt intimidating. Resistance struggles to survive in an environment where consistent action is present, because each completed step reinforces a sense of capability and control. Over time, this creates a shift in identity, where the person no longer sees themselves as someone who hesitates, but as someone who acts. Another important aspect is that action transforms abstract goals into tangible results. When ideas remain in the mind, they are vulnerable to resistance, but once they are expressed through action, they become real and measurable. This process replaces doubt with evidence, making it harder for resistance to argue against progress. Even imperfect action is more powerful than perfect intention, because it moves the individual out of a passive state and into an active one where growth becomes possible. Resistance may still appear, but its influence diminishes each time it is ignored and overridden by decisive movement, gradually losing its ability to control behavior and shape outcomes. The idea that discipline overrides emotion challenges the common belief that success depends on feeling motivated, inspired, or ready before taking action. Emotions are naturally unstable, shifting from enthusiasm to doubt, from confidence to hesitation, often without warning. If a person relies on these changing states to determine when to act, consistency becomes impossible, and resistance gains control by simply waiting for motivation to fade. Discipline operates differently because it is rooted in decision rather than feeling. It is the ability to follow through on a commitment regardless of emotional fluctuations, creating a stable pattern of behavior that is not dependent on temporary moods. When discipline is present, action becomes a standard, not a choice debated each day. Resistance often uses emotion as its primary tool, amplifying discomfort, boredom, or fear to make tasks seem harder than they actually are. It convinces the mind that if something feels difficult or unpleasant, it should be avoided. Discipline breaks this connection by separating action from emotion, allowing a person to move forward even when the internal experience is not ideal. This shift is crucial because most meaningful progress involves periods of discomfort, repetition, and delayed results, all of which can trigger resistance. By choosing discipline, an individual accepts that feelings are not reliable indicators of what should be done, and instead follows a predefined standard or routine. Over time, this consistent behavior reduces the influence of resistance, because the mind begins to understand that hesitation will not change the outcome. Discipline also builds trust within oneself, as repeated follow-through strengthens the belief that commitments will be honored regardless of circumstances. This internal trust becomes a powerful source of confidence, replacing the need for constant motivation. Another important aspect is that discipline simplifies decision-making, removing the daily negotiation between what is easy and what is necessary. When actions are predetermined, there is less room for resistance to introduce doubt or delay. This creates a sense of structure and control, making it easier to maintain progress even in challenging situations. While emotions may still fluctuate, their impact becomes limited because they no longer dictate behavior. In this way, discipline acts as a stabilizing force, ensuring that progress continues even when motivation disappears, and gradually reshaping the individual's identity into someone who acts based on purpose rather than feeling. The idea that your mind must be trained emphasizes that mental strength is not something people are simply born with, but something that is developed through consistent effort and intentional practice. The mind, by default, is conditioned to seek comfort, avoid risk, and conserve energy, which naturally creates resistance when faced with challenges or opportunities that require growth. Without training, it tends to follow habitual patterns of doubt, distraction, and procrastination, reacting automatically to discomfort instead of responding with clarity and control. Training the mind means becoming aware of these patterns and deliberately reshaping them so that they support progress rather than prevent it. This process begins with observation, noticing how thoughts arise in moments of decision, especially when resistance appears. Instead of accepting every thought as truth, a trained mind questions and evaluates them, distinguishing between helpful guidance and limiting beliefs. Over time, this awareness creates a gap between impulse and action, allowing for more intentional choices. Consistency plays a central role in this development, as repeated exposure to discomfort gradually reduces its intensity. When a person regularly chooses to act despite hesitation, the mind begins to adapt, recognizing that discomfort is not a threat but a normal part of growth. This adaptation rewires mental responses, making it easier to face similar situations in the future. Training also involves strengthening focus, as a scattered mind is more vulnerable to resistance. By practicing concentration and directing attention toward meaningful goals, a person reduces the influence of distractions and negative thought loops that can derail progress. Another important aspect is emotional regulation, learning to experience fear, doubt, or uncertainty without being controlled by them. This does not mean eliminating these emotions, but rather developing the ability to move forward in their presence. As the mind becomes more disciplined and resilient, it begins to operate with greater stability, reducing the internal conflict that often leads to hesitation. Over time, this transformation changes how challenges are perceived, shifting from something to be avoided to something to be engaged with. A trained mind does not eliminate resistance completely, but it reduces its power by refusing to be governed by it, creating a sense of control that allows consistent action even in uncertain or uncomfortable situations. The idea that growth lies beyond resistance highlights a fundamental truth about progress. Everything meaningful requires moving through discomfort rather than avoiding it. Resistance appears whenever a person approaches something unfamiliar, challenging, or demanding, because the mind is naturally wired to prefer what is known and predictable. This creates a boundary between the current version of oneself and the expanded version required for greater success, confidence, or achievement. On one side of that boundary lies comfort, where actions are easy and outcomes are familiar, but growth is limited. On the other side lies uncertainty, effort, and discomfort, but also the potential for transformation. Resistance acts as the signal that this boundary is being approached, often creating hesitation, doubt, or the urge to retreat. Many people misinterpret this signal as a reason to stop, believing that discomfort indicates something is wrong, when in reality it indicates that change is possible. Growth demands new behaviors, new ways of thinking, and often a departure from established habits, all of which can feel unnatural at first. This unfamiliarity triggers resistance, not because the path is incorrect, but because it challenges existing patterns. When a person chooses to move forward despite this internal pushback, they begin to expand their capacity, gradually adapting to what once felt difficult. Over time, actions that initially required effort become more natural, and the boundary of comfort shifts outward. This process reveals that resistance is not an obstacle to growth, but a companion to it, appearing precisely where development is needed most. Each encounter with resistance presents a decision point, either to remain within current limits or to push beyond them. C. Choosing the latter consistently leads to the accumulation of new skills, experiences, and perspectives, all of which contribute to personal and professional advancement. The discomfort associated with this process is temporary, but the results are lasting, reshaping identity and capability. Avoiding resistance, on the other hand, preserves comfort in the short term, but reinforces limitation over time, keeping potential unrealized. As individuals repeatedly move through resistance, they begin to reinterpret it, no longer seeing it as something to fear, but as an indicator of opportunity. This shift in perception changes the relationship with challenge, making it easier to engage with difficult tasks and persist through obstacles. The more this pattern is reinforced, the more natural growth becomes, as the individual learns to associate discomfort with progress rather than danger. In the end, winning in life is not about defeating the world around you, but mastering the world within you. Resistance will always appear in different forms: fear, doubt, hesitation, and the desire to stay comfortable. But it only has power when you listen to it. The moment you recognize it, challenge it, and act despite it, you begin to take control of your direction. Every step forward, no matter how small, weakens its influence and strengthens your confidence. Success is not reserved for those who never feel resistance, but for those who refuse to be ruled by it. When you train your mind, commit to discipline, and take consistent action, you move beyond limitations and step into growth, purpose, and achievement. The life you seek is not blocked by external barriers, but delayed only by the resistance you have yet to overcome. Wishing you strength, clarity, and courage on your journey ahead. May you rise above every doubt, take bold action, and create the life you truly deserve. Thank you for your time and attention.